Hey, hello everybody. I'm Josh Welsh, president of Film Independent, and welcome to Film Independent Presents. We are so excited and happy to be able to share the fantastic animated film Wolfwalkers with you, which if you're watching this, you've just seen. And I would like to welcome, we're so happy to have the co-directors of the film, Tomm and Ross Stewart here today for conversation. Before we get started, just a couple quick thank yous from me. I want to thank our lead sponsor, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. Thank you so much. We love you at the HFPA. You make this entire program year-round possible. And for that, we are very, very grateful. I also want to thank our screening partner, Vision Media. That's the platform we use for our screenings. We love working with you. And last but certainly not least, thank you to our media partner, the Los Angeles Times. So with that, I would love to just dive into the conversation. Tomm and Ross, thank you so much for taking time from dialing into Zoom from Ireland and being part of this conversation.
Thanks, pleasure, Josh. Thanks for having us. Yeah.
You know, it's always terrible when at a film Q&A somebody starts by saying not a question so much as a comment, but I want to start with that myself because my comment is just I want to thank you both for the films that you've made. You know, I love animated films. I have a daughter who's now 14, and I've spent her life going to animated films. And while there's a lot of great animation out there, there's also a lot of terrible animation, to be candid about it. And not to start things off on a negative foot, but there's you see these films that are just aimed at the lowest common denominator, but visually and in terms of the writing. And with your films, it's, starting with Secret of Kells in 2009, Song of the Sea in 2014, and now Wolfwalkers. These films are so inspiring. I mean, they're visually beautiful, they're emotionally resonant, and you take such risks with storytelling where you're doing things that are just, I'm like, how the hell did they get these made is one of them in the back of my mind. But I really just want to thank you for showing what is possible with animation. And hopefully people will be inspired by your work and, elevate their own game. But to turn that into a question, I would like to, before getting to Wolfwalkers specifically, could you talk a bit about the animation scene in Ireland, like how you came together to make these films? Was there a tradition that you were building on, or were you really making something from scratch?
There wasn't so much a tradition of Irish animation. It was fairly scrappy, like a kind of cottage industry when we were kids. But then around 86, we were still kids, and the Don Bluth studio opened in Ireland, and they started hiring. I guess Ireland was a lower cost country at the time and still had a lot of talented artists. And so they started hiring young Irish people to train as animators. And then Jimmy Murakami set up a studio. They made the Teenage Turtles here. And there were several studios in the 80s and early 90s. And then when Ross and I were teenagers and when we started college, it was kind of the beginning of the end of that era of American studios that were working out of Dublin. And so by the time we graduated from college, animation college, there wasn't really any kind of studios making movies at any scale. So it was pretty quiet. There was a few little scrappy studios that were just starting up at the same time as us. But when we started about 20 years ago, we were kind of building from scratch in terms of Irish, Indigenous, original projects. And the industry that had been there that was servicing American studios had kind of moved to Asia, really, or else back to the States,
Yeah, because Ireland kind of went from being, I suppose, a service country to kind of an entrepreneur country. Like the Celtic Tiger happened around the time that we were in college, which is our name for the economic boom of the late 90s, and I think that allowed a lot of industries to start up and people to take chances and take risks and start their own studio. And it's mad when you look at the studios that are in Dublin now and around the country, a lot of them are from our era of graduates from maybe a couple of years before to a couple of years after. They're the people that decided to take that risk and open up the studios, and now they're employing 50, 100, over 100 people each. It's really amazing to see.
There's a real Irish animation boom. And what's funny is it's gone back. What's ended up happening is the amount of talent that was fostered by people setting up their own small studios and then those studios growing has meant that there's a new service industry again. So like we have a sister studio, Lighthouse, that we set up just to do TV show service work for like international clients like Netflix, Amazon, Disney, people like that. So it's quite interesting the way it's kind of gone full circle, but this time the service studios are Irish owned. And as Ross was saying, a friend of ours there, just one of the founders of Boulder in Dublin, which is a huge studio. I think it's owned by Hasbro now, and they have several hundred employees. But she was a classmate of ours in college, and she got given a big carved rock that she posted on Facebook that she'd done 20 years of service in Boulder media. So, you know, it's crazy to think that 20 years later, the industry is really booming, and mostly our classmates from Ballyfermot Animation College. Yeah.
That's great. So it looks, you know, looking at the chronology of your 3 films, it looks like you take about 5 years, right, between from 2009 to 14 to 20. Can you, I'm curious just like overall what the workflow is on one of your films? Like how much time is spent writing, developing? How long do you spend on the actual animation? I mean, I'm not surprised it takes 5 years. They're such meticulously crafted and beautiful. So it's like,
Kells took 10 years really, because, you know, we set up in 2000. We had the idea, I guess, in 99, and then it got released in 2009. But that was because we were like cutting our teeth and kind of proving ourselves. And as I said, kind of trying to build something out of nothing. And since then, yeah, we've had a nice cycle since then. But they take like Wolfwalkers, the original idea was 7 years ago, but we were finishing Song of the Sea, and then Breadwinner was in production, and then Wolfwalkers was next. So things have started to speed up a little bit now. The production itself, the actual like all day, every day, you know, hundreds of people working on drawing the animation is usually 2 or 3 years. And the rest of the time before that is a mixture of raising the finance, getting the script right, you know, a little bit of, well, you know, a fair bit of work doing designs and character designs and, you know, development work. And each project now it's starting to feel a bit breakneck, you know, because they get financed in a way in 2 years, and we're like, oh no, because we're used to having a long time while we're looking for the money, where we're just very slowly evolving and developing the project. But now it's starting to speed up, so it's quite funny.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Could you talk a bit about, I mean, I think the visual look of all of your films is so unique and feels handcrafted, and it's so made with such artistry. But let's talk specifically about Wolfwalkers. How did you approach the look of that film? Were you trying things a little bit differently from Song of the Sea and Kells, or you know, what's your approach to the animation itself?
I think we were building on the artistry of the previous films, because we had learned a lot, and we'd also learned what wasn't possible, you know, within our constraints of budget and time and everything before. So Tom and myself really thought for Wolfwalkers that we could, you know, try all the things that we wanted to, and you know, using the lessons that we'd learned from the other 2 films, and bring it to Wolfwalkers and kind of raise the bar a bit. And I think we wanted to really, you know, make it a very artist-led film, you know, and also collaborate with everyone on the film a lot more. So even from storyboards, we, you know, it was the first time to have story teams and allow the storyboarders to pitch and to suggest, you know, like story edits and stuff. And the whole way then through production, we wanted like supervisors and leads input on different departments, and we allowed like the scene illustration department, which is our kind of glorified concept art stage. We had like group meetings, and they would pitch ideas and they would get involved. So it wasn't really myself and Tom just like leading. We really kind of collaborated a lot more.
That's great. Could you talk about the drawing process of how that works? Like, how do you generate the animation? Like, of course, we're very acquainted here with, you know, computer generated animation, and then there's great stop motion at Leica and other places. But this seems hand drawn, hand created. Can you just talk about that process a bit?
Yeah, the idea was to really celebrate hand drawn, and like our first movie, all the character animation was drawn on paper. Secret of Kells was all drawn on paper, and then afterwards we kind of put so much treatment on it that we felt that people were confused and thought we'd done it in the computer. And ironically, I mean, there's parts of Wolfwalkers that's completely done on paper, like the Wolf Vision, but most of it is drawn in TV Paint on Cintiqs on like drawing tablets. So we're still drawing every single character 12 times a second. So it's a hugely laborious process, but we've taken out the scanning, and that's great for the character animation. It means that we can have more iteration. We're able to, try out more different versions of each movement. And a lot of the animators that trained on paper have seamlessly moved to drawing on the tablets. So that's maybe the most digital part of the production in terms of creating the animation. Backgrounds are still, painted on paper with watercolor,
Wow.
watercolors, and all the
Yeah,
backgrounds are detailed line drawings with pencils and pens, and very, like as Ross always says, the room where they made we had different like animators and people in different rooms, and the bottom floor was the most messy, paper pencily and kind of more zen room, and the very top floor was the compositing team, who were every bit as talented as artists, but their job was to take all these elements and combine them all in the computer for the final image. But yeah, we had the whole everything from fantastic nuke animate or compositing team to pure woodblock print artists who were making backgrounds that looked like prints on paper.
yeah, the background line department room that Tom was talking about there reminded me of like the old art class that we had in secondary school. There was a real kind of art and craft vibe off it, and like they had a bucket full of pens that they had gone through, like, and gradually over the course of production it built up, and by the end of it it was just full of little nubs of pencils and empty pens and everything. And like a lot of the people that worked in that department were sculptors or printmakers or illustrators in their in their spare time or as another profession. So they really brought all that craft and all that artistry to the work. Yeah.
Tom, you mentioned woodblock, and I wanted to ask about that. In the background, it felt like there was more woodblock imagery in this than in the previous films. Is that right? Was that something you were expanding on, or how did
Yeah,
you?
it was intentional because Tom himself wanted to draw from the 17th century woodblock printing that was done at the time, at the time that Wolfwalkers was set. And the woodblock prints that they had were very rudimentary. Like they were, they weren't the most skilled of printmakers, and a lot of the time there was really bad mistakes and like very aggressive mark making and offset printing. So we tried to get a lot of that the whole way through. Even in the the ink and paint, you can see sometimes the color block is a little bit shifted out from the line. And I think, yeah, it was very intentional to make this colonial town seem very much like the art of that time. But yeah, one of the artists, Clara, who helped refine that look. She's a printmaker herself, so she brought a lot of that talent to it. We were really lucky to have her.
I have to say the experience of watching the film is there's I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I feel like it's a physically different experience watching a film that's made this way. Like it is easy on the eyes in a way that straight digital imagery is not. Like it almost feels like you're looking at paper, or there's a tactile thing that is soothing to the eyes. I mean, it draws you in.
Sometimes you are, I mean, the Wolf Vision was an interesting example because they would build the team would build the environments in CG and move the camera through it, but then after that it would get printed and each frame was drawn with charcoal and pencils on paper, and we really fought to keep that. Like we wanted to see each page fluttering under the camera like a pencil test. And the biggest retake we gave really was that if something started to look digital, we went, no, pare it back, let's keep the thumbprints on it. And that's kind of the manifesto of the studio. But on Wolfwalkers, we really wanted to, make a virtue of the fact that it was hand-drawn and show. We saw, Princess Kaguya, the tale of Princess Kaguya from Ghibli. And I felt like that threw down the gauntlet. That showed that a feature film could be very obviously just drawings right there in front of you. And we love the old Disney movies like 101 Dalmatians or Sword and Stone, where you could see that they were lively and you forgot that they were drawings, but every now and then something with like a little scratch or a little nick in the page would show up, and you'd kind of remember that you were looking at drawings. And it had a charm, maybe like picture books, like children's illustrated books. They have a charm to them.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you kind of a story question. again, with all of your films, I feel like when I watch them, I feel like that, you know, I know I'm watching an Irish film. These are specifically, there's like an Irish storytelling tradition and content that we're watching. But with Wolfwalkers, were you drawing on existing, forgive me, I don't know the answer to this, were you drawing on existing like mythology or stories, or was this a story that you created out of whole cloth, the idea of the Wolfwalker and you know, that entire world?
It was a little bit of both, really. I mean, the folktale does exist. The Wolf People of Ossory is the folktale that we did use to base the story on, where this group of people were cursed by St. Patrick, supposedly, because they wouldn't convert to Christianity, and he said that they would turn into wolves when they slept. And so they roamed the forests as normal wolves, and it was kind of like a curse or a blessing, depending on how you saw it. And that family was supposed to have inherited that and pass it down through the generations. So they ended up actually going to the States, and still had that curse attached to the family that they would turn into wolves when they slept. But it's not very widely known. You know, it's quite a localized folktale, and even a lot of people here in Kilkenny wouldn't know that tale. And one of the things we realized, Tom, myself, is that with the extinction of the wolves, a lot of the stories connected with the wolves and a lot of the cultural references disappeared too. It's almost like because the creature wasn't there, there was no point in talking about it or telling the stories anymore. And that was really, it was really sad to us, you know, that like it isn't, I mean, the extinction of the species of the animal is really sad in itself, but from a human point of view, then we lose so much as well. But yeah, once we had the folktale, then I think Tom and myself embellished a lot on this story. You know, like we figured out that they could heal and they could use magic, you know, and that there was a whole.
We had the healing thing as a separate thing for a while. For a while, the healing thing was like there was a character called Biddy Early in Irish. Well, she really existed, but there's a lot of folklore around her. She was this kind of healing medicine woman, and we kind of loved that tradition as well. And I remember in earlier drafts, you know, Maeve's mother was like one of those healers. Like, but then we kind of melded that to the folklore, as if not just being able to turn into a wolf was part of the curse, but also being a healer. So we kind of just that kind of stuff we mushed together for story reasons, really. Yeah.
Wow. And when did you focus on telling the story through a young girl like that? I mean, let me say one thing I love about this is her father is a British soldier who's come over, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cromwell.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that your protagonist is a girl whose dad is like, in a different version of this movie, he would be equally villainous. He'd be the awful dad along with Cromwell. But here it's a much more nuanced story.
Yeah, he's kind of an antagonist.
It's kind of the point of it, though, really. Like, we had to be especially careful in Ireland because there has been a history through Irish history of villainizing the English, you know, and villainizing the English people. And we've you know, come past that stage now. So we didn't want it to fall into this trope of like, oh, the baddie is the English guy and the good person is the Irish person. So it made sense. And also it's a, you know, one of the main themes is about crossing the divide and the polarization of society, that you can be friends with someone on the other side of it. So it kind of made sense for Robin to be an English girl, for our hero to have to overcome that, you know, and we follow her story. But yeah, I mean, Robin was originally a boy, you know, when we first came up with the story, and it became quite clear that for a little boy who wanted to be a hunter and go out, there wouldn't have been any obstacles. They would have encouraged him, if anything. So so once Robin then became a girl, everything else fell into place. You know, it really became like a story of kind of you know, Robin and Maeve are both girls in, you know, with their own personal troubles, but there's such a comparison in one way and such a contrast in another way because of the society that they've grown up in. Mm-hmm. And even though they're told by society that they should be enemies, that they're able to become friends in the end.
Yeah, I think the colonial aspect was always interesting to us, and recently I've been reading a lot about Native American, you know, folklore and beliefs, and I read a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, and it's a Native American biologist, and she's talking about, you know, the Native American belief system, and then she's synthesized the kind of Western biology science into her belief system, and she talks about becoming indigenous to place. And I like that that's kind of in Wolfwalkers, that like Robin is a colonizer and she's coming with a colonial force, but she becomes indigenous to place. And I like the idea that you don't sort of have this, oh, you're colonizer, you're bad, oh, you're indigenous, you're good, but that we can all work together to become indigenous to place and to respect where we're from and to understand where we're from. Because Robin Kimmerer in the book Braiding Sweetgrass even points out that the native people of her tribe were newcomers once upon a time, and they had to learn from the animals and the plants that had been there before them. So I like that we kind of did that with Robin. I mean, we didn't know about that way of looking at things, but it was kind of what we were going for. And I like that kind of reimagining colonization as something that can be overcome, not just a wound that's forever there that we can't overcome.
Wow, that's beautiful. This is a little bit off topic, but I want to mention Film Independent. We're screening another film this week, the documentary "I Am Greta" about
Yeah.
activist Greta Thunberg, and it's a great film, definitely worth seeing. But there's a scene in it where Greta goes. I think she's in Sweden, but I'm not positive. But she's with a group of people walking up to a forest where a forest used to be, and it's been stripped for, I think, mining purposes, and it's just this expanse of dirt. And then way up in the distance, you can see a wall of trees where like way, way far away. And Greta walks all the way to the trees. And I just watched Wolfwalkers. I was like, God, this is just like, it's like
Yeah.
a powerful young girl who's like the voice of truth, who is like confronting sort of environmental degradation and, what you lose when there's the colonization and the encroachment on the natural environment. Anyway, it was just,
No, we thought about Greta too because she
Mm.
came to the fore while we were developing the movie, and she really, her and Robin, we did see some similarities with, and she's such an inspiring young woman, and
yeah.
that whole movement, it was all the kind of stuff that we were trying to speak to, and that way of thinking about things. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great movie. I saw it during, I think it was part of TIFF online or the Cork Film Festival online, which it's a great one. Yeah.
We saw probably, unfortunately, a lot of similarities into ecological disasters and environmental disasters while we were making the film, for the 7 years. Like when we were doing the forests on fire in the film, the forests were on fire in Australia, in Brazil, South America, all across there, and then the west coast of the States too. So it was quite sad. Like when we were looking for reference, we just had to look at the news and we're like, Jesus, we haven't really learned so much.
No, yeah. I wanted to ask about Apple Plus when they got involved in the project and how that. Let me do a two-part question. How and when did Apple get involved? And also, I'm just love to hear you both talk about the experience of having the film come out in the midst of a pandemic, where obviously it's a different type of release than anyone could have expected.
Yeah, but thankfully it's in cinemas again now in Ireland. We're #1 in the box office in Ireland.
Oh, good.
It's a little bit like winning the school sports day because everyone got gastroenteritis or something. But anyway, it's still happy to be able to say that I was #1 in the box office once in my life. But,
with a record box office taking of something like 200 quid.
God loves. Anyway, look, I mean, geez, we didn't expect the pandemic, but we knew that teaming up with Apple would give us a further reach than we'd ever had. Like a lot of our movies have been, and we're still working with a lot of our partners like G Kids and Child Film in Japan, and they did a great job, but they could only get it so far because it would always be on, art house cinemas and limited release. And so we knew, like, by working with Apple, that we'd have and we kind of had the sense that there was a lot of fans scattered around that wouldn't be able to ever see it in theaters. So we knew that even before 2020 and all the madness of that being with Apple was a big window to the world for us and for our project. And yeah, I mean, they came aboard. We kind of we did a co-production with France and Luxembourg again, and also with China, who had a lot of success with Song of the Sea there in China. And so the budget was more or less in place, but Apple came in and then bought the worldwide rights outside of the co-production territories. And that was great, because that was kind of a way to shore up the finance of the production. Early on, we were still in storyboards. And it was a way, and we knew Tara Sorensen in there because we'd worked with her. She had been an executive in Amazon before, and we'd done TV shows with her. So we knew she had the right kind of spirit creatively to work with. She's very focused on you know, what's good for kids and education, and you know, she's that kind of commissioning editor, so or like a commissioning editor from the old days. So it was easy fit, and we were excited to be the first feature, you know, coming out on Apple. So we knew we'd kind of there'd be a bit of attention around that, you know. So yeah, it was
They've been really amazing with the marketing publicity.
yeah.
Though, like they have a huge team helping us, and like it's pretty amazing for us to see what level of publicity we can get, because it wouldn't have been possible for us before as
It's
a
quite,
small Irish studio.
it's quite sad that it's 2020, because I would like to go to New York and see that big painting they did. Or apparently there's going to be billboards on Sunset, and I mean, we've always been the tiny indie, you know, David and Goliath stories. For just to have a chance to be batting at that scale is amazing, especially for such a hand-drawn film too. Usually you kind of feel like hand-drawn movies, stop motion, they're kind of arty, they don't get the same like marketing push, and that's fine. And the CG movies or the big Pixar Disneys are going to get pushed. To see a hand-drawn movie being pushed like that is really exciting, and it would be interesting to have seen what it would have been like in a more sane year, you know, how it
Yeah.
would have worked. But still great. And I mean, they had a very light touch creatively, so it was nice to work with them. And I think, yeah, given the pandemic, it's great to have a partner like that, you know, because it means that it's going to come out, and a lot of people will be in lockdown wherever they are in the world and be able to watch it, you know.
I think you'll have a huge audience,
Mm.
for sure.
And then they might go and find the old one. Then they might go
Yeah.
and song it. That's nice, you know. You have a back catalog to discover, you know.
Well, I was so happy that both with Song of the Sea and Kells, they were both nominated for Oscars, and I mean, not to put
That
too
was
much
huge.
weight on the award season, but that just shines a brighter light and make
Oh, it was massive.
see the
Yeah.
films because of that, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, without like back then we didn't. We were partnered with like G Kids, which were really small with Kells. They'd just kind of grown out of the New York Children's Film Festival. So really they didn't have much marketing budget or anything. They did a lot of work with what they had, but still an Oscar nomination put it to another level, and you know, put our company to another level, and made people, you know, curious what else we might do. So yeah, that was very meaningful.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, when we were making Secret of Kells, we our plan was really just to make a film. That's all.
Get it
And
finished was
yeah,
an
yeah,
achievement.
just to finish it, and then you know, wipe our hands and kind of go, okay, what do we do now? Go off and find another job. So yeah, the nominations really opened so many doors for Cartoon Saloon, and for us just made possible all these other films, all these other projects. So
Well, I
that's
don't want to belabor the point, but again, it speaks to the work that you do with Secret of Kells. Your first big film is about like a kid and a monk and illuminated manuscript. This is
yeah.
does not scream out as like hugely,
You know, for kids.
so good. I remember showing it to my daughter, and I wasn't sure. She was very young at the time. I was like, I don't know if this is gonna fly, and it did. She loved
Yeah.
it. So it's, you know,
Yeah, it's
don't
nice.
underestimate- you guys do not underestimate your audience, and it works. Right?
That's it. I think that's it. And I think we make the kind of films we would have liked to have seen, or that, you know, I mean, I remember seeing My Neighbor Totoro and then Princess Mononoke when I was in college, and kind of wishing I'd seen those as a kid. They weren't around, you know, when we were kids. So yeah, you try and also you're making an independent film, so you might as well make something completely, you know, mad. You know?
Mad, yeah. I mean, the elevator pitch for Secret of Kells, I'm sure that like when you and Paul were trying to find funding for that, Tom, I'm sure there was quite a few people that just had a blank stare when you told them.
Yeah. And that's why partners are important. I mean, we've worked with the same partners now for all three movies, because people like Didier Brunner, who believed in the film back before, you know, when we were just some college graduates trying to make a movie about monks, you know, people like that are so important. And so we continue working with them, and it's been great, you know. There's been an ongoing kind of collaboration. Stefan in Melazine Studio 352 in Luxembourg, they worked on this project as well. So we've been on a journey as well with them.
Wow. So I one last question for you, which regards music. Again, I'll pitch this as a question about all of your films, but I feel like you work with music in really interesting ways, and it's very integral to the story, and you create original music for the films. Can you talk about on Wolfwalkers how you approach working with your composer and music throughout the film?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just talking about. It was a continuation. Like Bruno Coulet was like you know, kind of way out of our league, as it were, when we were making Secret of Kells. He was also at the same time working on Coraline for Leica, and he was very established in France. And he kind of believed in the project and got involved and worked with an amazing Irish band, Keela, folk kind of Irish traditional music band, and they were really great collaborators, and they worked really well together. And so they kind of got on so well that, you know, Bruno and Keela started working on other projects together, and then they came back and worked with us on Song of the Sea, and the kind of, let's say, the collaboration grew there, and so it just felt natural. I mean, when Ross and I were going to direct like number 3 in these kind of movies, to work with Bruno and Keela again felt very natural. And I think, you know, we evolved this kind of visual style between the two different worlds, and, you know, contrast, and that came very naturally in Wolfwalkers. We had Bruno focusing more on the overall score and working with the orchestra, and then he left areas for Keela to bring their kind of trad and that kind of a little bit more chaos, a little bit more wildness and percussion, and they kind of batted it back and forwards at the demo stage. And then a lot of the instrumentation and orchestration and stuff was kind of a two-hander between them. After we'd recorded the orchestra, we, just before the lockdown, we had a week or so in a recording studio here in Ireland, where they kind of, Keela brought their energy to the music that Bruno had written. And that was really,
I think
really,
that's
really,
that's
yeah.
what kind of makes Bruno maybe a little bit unique, in that he's very open to like something very organic on the spot, you know. Like even when he was conducting, or when he composed everything for the orchestra, he would have like solo cellists or solo harp players or solo violinists, and he would allow them the freedom to take the music that he had written, but to interpret it as they want, you know, and to bring a lot of emotion to it. So he isn't very rigid like that, you know. And then working with Keela too, you could see that he would like bounce ideas back and forth, and he would allow Dee and Keela to just like do some beautiful little solo on the fiddle and stuff. So I think that organicness is what maybe makes his compositions really touching and really emotive in the end, you know. He has this like very, very solid score underneath, but he has these flourishes and allows musicians to bring their own talent to it, you know. So
Yeah.
it is very similar to the collaboration that we had on Wolfwalkers, all right.
What's kind of beautiful is that Bruno's kind of known for using human voice as part of the music. And I remember when I first met him, his daughter was a tiny baby, you know, and she's singing on Wolfwalkers, you know.
Oh,
She
wow.
kind of part of the soundscape. So it's kind of been a journey, you know.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, Tomm and Ross, thank you so much for talking with us today. On behalf of Film Independent, I just want to say, you know, I love the film so much. I hope lots of people see it, and at Film Independent, we'll do our best to help spread the word. But thank you again for being part of Film Independent Presents. And someday in the future, I hope, you know, you'll come to the US, or we'll go to Ireland. It'd be great to meet in person. But until then, stay safe, and thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Josh, and thanks to Film Independent for showing Wolfwalkers again.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.